Guys and gals and non-binary pals, welcome back to the VPZD show. What are we, episode 30?
33.
That's how old Jesus was when he was crucified.
Really?
And speaking about crucified, Marty McCary, welcome back.
Speaking of crucifixion.
Middle Eastern guy, Semitic.
The Egyptian magician, as we like to call him here.
Every time we get together and do this, we laugh before the show for like an hour or two. And then I think there's nothing else to laugh about. And then we just keep going.
It doesn't stop.
It doesn't.
It can't stop and it won't stop.
But all the best jokes are off air. Is that fair to say? Sadly.
Well, let's just say that they would get us. You can't even use the word canceled anymore. It would be like deleted.
Right.
Yeah.
It was already been canceled.
You
just delete it.
The three of us have been uber canceled.
Now, Z, tell them about that phone call you just got while we're waiting to do the show.
So we're getting ready to start the show. And my phone blows up, and I keep the phone on now because actually I better turn it off now because my kids are
financial advisor. It's
my financial advisor. He's like, I'm selling everything. I'm like, but the market's going up. Well, but science. It was CVS. And I was like, oh, because I have like 3 missed calls from CVS. And I'm like, well, what's going on? I haven't been to CVS in forever. And the last time I got a Shingrix shot because I don't want to get herpes on my any parts. And they
my CVS is my favorite PBM. Favorite of all the PBMs that put out of business local independent community pharmacies.
I see. You really believe in the business model of the CVS.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to tell you about my local community pharmacy after your story, but go ahead.
Oh, man. Oh, God. Well, I've done things on PBM too. And let's just say, CVS is definitely in the top evildoers in that sense. But so as an evildoer, they call me. And I pick up the phone. You guys heard it.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I'm such and such with CVS. Can you please give me your date of birth and what other information?
Your credit card number.
Yeah, basically. Your bank
ask
account.
You straight up for your date of birth just to confirm who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
It's like, who the fuck are you?
You fucking called me.
Who the fuck are you?
Like, you called me. Why are you asking for personal information? And I said, I'm sorry, is this about Shingrix? And she's like, no, it's actually about flu shot. I'm like, well, you're telling me anyways now.
No, first you're like, is this about my penicillin? And then
everyone knows that my syphilis is resistant to penicillin.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
She wants to make sure you're not in that subgroup of Americans that don't need your flu shot, those under 6 months of age.
Oh, you're right. The people who can...
That's why she needs your social security
number.
number.
What's your date of birth? Yesterday?
Yeah.
Is she working on commission? Why are they calling you for a flu shot?
Dude, I have gotten a flu shot every year since I was 18.
Explains a lot.
It does. It explains all the deformities. It explains the high,
She got hepatitis B shot at birth?
The low IQ. Yeah. Oh, I had 3 of them just to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah. All the different hepatitis. Like I got E and D.
You even got ED vaccine.
You need to get
yes.
upon delivery.
And now I have ED. So it's very...
Ashish Jha says that's why God gave us 2 arms, one for the COVID shot and one for the flu shot each year. That's what he said.
Well, then where does the Shingrix go? Right into the cavernosum of the glands. But yeah, she's. I'm like, well, why are you really harassing me to get a flu shot when I get one every year? Like, what is in it for you?
Yeah,
what is in it for you? Why does CVS run ads on their overhead system to get the COVID booster incessantly? This message is brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah, maybe there is some backdoor. Also, isn't it August 19th or something?
It's too early to get a flu shot.
A little bit early.
Well, if you don't have your flu shot, you could go on an overseas travel 10 days before a presidential debate and screw it up because you're still sick and on medication.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
And have a stutter.
It's important to get your flu shot.
Now, don't make fun of Uncle Joe. All right. That is
I wouldn't make fun of him.
No.
I make fun of the pundits who wanted to dismiss the people, their actual doctors who wrote articles. Was he on a cold medicine? And somebody tweeted, did he just have a stutter?
Oh, yeah.
Rather than address the elephant in the room.
The Parkinson's.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't confirm that, but
you haven't checked for cogwheeling.
I didn't do a Romberg sign, right?
So my local, I go to a independent community pharmacy, not one of the giant chains.
Thank goodness.
Pretty close to my house, and it's an Ethiopian couple. It's sort of the American dream. She's a pharmacist. A lot of pharmacists from Ethiopia. They have a lot of pharmacy schools, kind of like nurses from the Philippines.
I know that.
You'll see a lot of Ethiopians behind the elevated counter, right? It's always got to be elevated a foot or two.
Very important.
Right? So they look down.
I go through the drive-through and they look down at me there too.
Yeah. Injera bread and pharmacies.
Yes.
1-2 punch. Okay.
So he's an accountant. So they started this pharmacy as their family business and they've been running it for like 10 years. And then CVS, which is not only their competitor, but the pharmacy benefit manager. And as you know, a PBM is a pay-as-you-go insurance for drugs where you pay after the fact. and say they so-called manage the benefit and they take a big cut.
Yeah, a middleman. Yeah.
Right. So they started cutting their reimbursements for the drugs of CVS PBM beneficiaries that walked into their independent pharmacy. So they would pay them less and less. And of course, they're paying their own CVS pharmacies more for the same drug.
Putting them out of business.
It's all
exactly.
integrated.
And so then they send letters every month saying, hey, we'd like to buy your pharmacy. And so this is how CVS became the biggest pharmacy in America on every block in America.
This is like the plot of every breakdancing movie from the 80s. Like the big corporation wants to buy the community center and put them out of business. Yeah. So we're going to have a breakdance off with CVS and the National Community Pharmacy Association.
They're a good group.
It was a great group. Yeah. I've spoken for them before. They're
so
wonderful.
like a third of America's pharmacies are still independent, but they're dropping like flies because they can't. I mean, CVS ultimately just cut this independent pharmacy out of their network altogether. Wow. And that was like 80% of the people that walked in, including me, because I had CVS Caremark as my PBM because that's what Johns Hopkins, my employer, uses because everyone, uses them.
And who's going to compound your Cialis now?
Well, he went there because it would give him the 14 pills, and other places were just nickel and dime.
Yeah, they're nickel and
2
dime.
pills a month.
Yeah, exactly. It's a penile benefit manager.
and to support American businesses.
Of course, American businesses. That's the most.
So, what were we going to talk about today? This was all just, unscripted nonsense.
Yeah. We'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about Marty's new book. He's got a book coming out.
That's right.
Yeah. Here's an advanced copy. If you
are we able to show it on camera?
Yeah, sure. We're going to do it.
Blind spots. When medicine gets it wrong and what it means for our health.
Ooh,
I like that title.
So we'll talk about that when it's time to do that.
We'll be back with
about 3-4 weeks from now. I'll be back in town.
Oh heck yeah.
I love the cover art. Let's just do one more plug for that.
You liked
it?
Look at that.
I love that stethoscope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As an oncologist, my physical exam tool of choice is the PET CT. But you stick with the stethoscope. You stick with the stethoscope.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Which end
Mine is the rectal. I just do rectals on everyone. Psych exam. I'm like, what?
FOBT positive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another life saved.
Valves of Houston attained.
So are you guys excited that now we're going to save money because Medicare is negotiating the price of 10 generic drugs?
So much money to be saved.
Goodness, in an election year that we're able to pull that off.
So 82% of Americans support Medicare's ability to negotiate prices. It sounds reasonable, right?
Sounds reasonable.
But the disproportionate celebration of total victory that we're now cutting healthcare costs and fixing our, $4.5 trillion economy, which is, feeding off of these chronic diseases that are worsening and the most over-medicated population in history, that's essentially going to be ignored so we can celebrate, what is it, $5 million, $5 billion, $6 billion?
$6 billion.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is a small amount of healthcare spending.
It's a rounding error on healthcare spending. It's good. I mean, it's good that they're doing it, but there's some things that people should know about the actual policy behind this sort of the political statement of we're reducing these top 10 Medicare spend drugs.
Yeah.
Because it's not what we think it is, as is the case in policy very often.
I have a few pieces of criticism. What's your criticism? You go first, Marty.
Well, I'm a surgeon. So when we see people, it's often for a brief period in their overall health journey. We get a snapshot into what medications are you on? What medical conditions do you have? And when I go through these lists in detail, because we got to document every medication and make sure, do they really need them? Do they need them during the operation? Do they need them after the operation? Do they need them at all? And what I realize is like, a lot of times they're like, I'll be, what's this for? I don't know. What's this for? I don't know. What's this for? I don't know. Okay. You don't need these things. Like go back to your doctor, maybe have a conversation, but X, Y, and Z, like you don't, somebody will be not eating because of a GI ailment. They'll be malnourished for weeks. And then after surgery, after the recovery, let's say they're cancer, GI cancer or something, they're behind on their nutrition. Why are they taking a cholesterol blocker, a lipid lowering drug during that period? It makes no sense. So I personally think the best way to lower drug prices in America is to stop taking drugs we don't need.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to the root. But we're never going to do that. So how are we going to patch this problem with Band-Aids, right? Because you're right. As an internist, this is all I do. So as a surgeon, you see it in that snapshot. As an internist, hospital medicine, they come in here. What's the med list, right? You spend so much bandwidth doing med reconciliation, where you reconcile what they're supposed to be on with what they're actually on and what they're getting in the hospital, and it's an ordeal. And you get dinged if you don't do it in a certain time period, and the nurses often falls disproportionately on the nurses to do this. And then you look at the list and you're like, why are we even reconciling these meds when they should be reconciled to the trash? Because this person shouldn't be on a diuretic when they're falling all the time, or they shouldn't, they're on 5 antihypertensives, but no one's addressed.
Deprescribing.
Yeah. Deprescribing.
Deprescribing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the bulk of my criticism is they're celebrating $6 billion victory. Well, it's the same administration that spent $10 billion on Paxlovid, which was primarily given to people who have been vaccinated, an indication for which Paxlovid does not work. And young people, where Paxlovid does not work. So you spent $10 billion without data, and then you save 6. Oh, thanks, -4. That's one point. Second point is that the savings is calculated as savings from the list price of Medicare, but not what Medicare is actually paying for the drug. So the actual savings might be a little bit lower. And then the next point is that in the time it took from the bill to pass to now, the prices of all these drugs have been ratcheted up year over year price increase that I suspect we're probably paying what we paid for just a couple of years ago for these medications.
And do you think that second point, do you think people know that Medicare is not paying the list price?
No, I don't think they know that. Yeah. I mean, it allows... Look, I mean, if you're a politician, well, one, I want to say right off the bat, I think all of us do care to lower the price of spending.
Yes.
The amount we spend in this country is horrendous for what we get. If we were living twice as long as other nations, sure, but we are not. Our life expectancy is worse than many of our peer countries, and we spend double GDP as, our competitor, Switzerland. Our next place, maybe almost double GDP as Switzerland.
How do Egyptians do?
That's interesting. I don't know Egypt off the top of my head. What is the GDP of in Egypt?
Well, I think the life expectancy is at least 30 years of age in Egypt.
That's pretty good.
Wow. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's the best 30.
I'm an outlier.
The first 30. Yeah, you're already...
I think
you're lucky.
For the U.S., we should just ask the question, WWAD, what would Anubis do? And just do that.
Yeah.
So back to you.
All right. So you were saying that. And what about the Duchenne muscular dystrophy drug?
Yeah. So then another point is that this administration has just rubber stamped so many drug approvals. So you start to save money on these 10 drugs, but you're approving so many drug products that cost horrendous amounts of money with no credible evidence. Aducanumab, the Alzheimer's drug, was approved.
I love that drug.
Yeah.
Doesn't work, but it's just cool.
I've already forgotten that I took it.
Yeah. $50,000 a month and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, $50,000 a month.
The Duchenne's muscular dystrophy gene therapy, the primary FDA reviewer said, do not approve this. And Peter Marks unilaterally approved it. It's going to cost probably a couple million per pop. Now, of course, Duchenne's is a very rare disease, so it's not going to be a huge budgetary impact. But if you're going to pretend that this is actually lowering prices, it's a total farce. This is a drop in the ocean of drug prices. Meanwhile, the political parties are heavily funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And I think it's nice to make lip service that you want to lower the price of these drugs, but none of them, I think, actually have the teeth to follow through with it, to actually lower the price. The best way to lower prices, don't approve things that don't work. Don't prescribe things that don't work. Figure out what does work and spend money on things based on how much benefit they provide.
And what's interesting is, so the FDA is quick to approve. It will approve these pharmaceutical funded things. Like you said, there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of money involved, and they'll look the other way at poor study design and various aspects like that. So what happens when MDMA, aka ecstasy, being studied for PTSD for a decade or more with an advocacy group doing the research because it's not patentable and there's no pharmaceutical company really, so they form some nonprofit thing to do it, I think, and they propose their thing, and the FDA just destroys it appropriately, says, this isn't, it's hard to blind when you're on a psychedelic. It's all these different things. There was a case of sexual assault. There was investigator bias, not reported adverse events. Sure, I bet if you actually look at, and you do, the actual study design of these other things,
so
you find
an unethical study, and it may very well also work.
That's right. So the thing is, here's a drug that could actually help people almost on a compassionate use basis for PTSD, which we have no great treatments for, and it's de-approved, which that's fine. They're actually looking at the science. Do better science. Great. But that doesn't happen for these other drugs.
But your point is that the moment you run an agency and you start to make exceptions,
yes,
people will naturally wonder, why is my drug not also the exception?
Exactly right.
You know?
So I'm sure the MDMA people are like, well, you approved aducanumab and it doesn't work at all. And it costs $50,000.
They need to start hiring some more former FDA reviewers, and then they might get their product approved, okay?
That's what it is.
Hire some former FDA staff.
And the FDA can be vindictive. They've done this to companies. They don't like something you do with one study, they take it out on another submission. And that's why everyone's afraid to criticize the FDA. By the way, I heard inside information that you've got the FDA and a tizzy, and a lot of people are following your stuff at the FDA, and a lot of people who work at the FDA agree with you because they're frustrated with the system and the inconsistencies. And it's not the threshold is too high or too low. It's erratic.
It's erratic. That's the problem. It's erratic. It's capricious. It varies product to product. That's the problem. It's that it's not consistent. It doesn't adhere to prior precedent. Sometimes it's lax. Sometimes it's strict. People need a reliable regulator. It is interesting, though, once you get to the point where, somebody asked me recently, do you think the FDA does more good or harm? And, at some point you really start to wonder, like, you and I, if we talked so much previously about boosters for everybody, you had the two primary FDA reviewers, Marion Gruber and Phil Krause, resign at FDA.
Actually, it came out they were fired. Did you see that?
Yeah, they were demoted by Marks internally.
Yeah, Peter Marks.
Yeah, demoted them internally. And the Biden administration put political pressure on FDA to directly approve boosters for young people, even though European nations didn't do it. And even though these two reviewers felt that it was not justified, they were demoted for that. If Trump had done anything at all comparable.
It had been Media Armageddon.
Media Armageddon. If Trump had done anything at all comparable to what the administration did for boosters, Biden administration, it would have been Media Armageddon. And that's the problem, in my opinion, when the journalists are on the same team as one political party, but not the other. They're a check and balance when Trump is in office, but when Biden's in office, they're just, the press release outlet for the Biden administration. That's the problem, I think.
And when I'm back in town in 3 weeks and we talk about the story of hormone replacement therapy, you'll see how the media also ran with that story. And
it's really fascinating, this churnalism, this kind of journalism around health. And because now it's taken on a political spin because there is that sort of bias towards, but then, there's also, what the hell was I even going to say? It's gone. You know what? The aducanumab.
You forgot the Alzheimer's.
I forgot to take it.
Yeah.
Well, it only slows the progression of early Alzheimer's. It doesn't stop.
It doesn't reverse.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And you also have long COVID these days.
That's the other thing. With my long COVID.
Yeah, with the
long COVID. You had short COVID.
I finally had short COVID.
So the first time was you had short COVID and then you got long COVID?
Yeah, I got long COVID, meaning 14 days.
Yeah. Was it symptomatic or asymptomatic?
It was. It was symptomatic for a few days and then asymptomatic. And I've done a couple of videos on this. It was an interesting experience getting back to boosters because I had only gotten the original vaccines back in 21, hadn't gotten the 27, that's we were talking about the media. And so recently I saw an article, my wife goes, hey, look at this. And it said, human aging occurs in two bursts. According to science, a new study, age 44 and age 60. And I'm like, well, I've been through 44 and I basically look like the Wicked Witch of the West after someone threw water on her. And so 60's coming. Then I looked at the actual thing and it's like, oh, these are all secondary markers of whatever telomere lengthening or whatever they're looking at. I'm like, this has nothing to do with actual biologic aging, like the qualitative effect.
I love how the media covers that Brian Johnson, who Brian Johnson lives in the Bay Area and he wants to longevity live for expert. Yeah. He experiments on himself.
Right.
And he eats all his meals from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. He wears a sleep ring. He doesn't drink alcohol. He only eats terrible vegetables and doesn't look like anything that tastes good.
Sounds miserable.
It sounds like you want to be dead soon. But
I would want to be dead if I lived like that.
And then he puts out this thing where it says that I've slowed. For me, I age 1 year every 18 months or every 24 months. And they just print that.
Yeah.
Brian Johnson says he ages 1 year every 24 months. What the fuck scale is this? You just made up a number. This is just totally make-believe.
Not all opinions are fact, man. That's what the Big Lebowski said something to that effect.
That's right.
Yeah, but again, it gets to this media. Like even the media kind of craziness around COVID. When I'm like day 7 and my symptoms are getting worse and my O2 sat is like 83 and 70 something, and I'm all this media conditioning, even for me, and we're sitting here kind of debunking the media conditioning. A lot of it's unconscious, and I'm like, oh, am I dying? think I'm dying. I also have these genetic defects that'll make me more, because I stupidly did a test that I never should have done, which was genetic testing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, like
I thought you were going to say COVID test, but
well,
that
too. But that was,
And then there you are with COVID. You take your socks off. You're like, do I have COVID toes? What's going on? Do I have the COVID toe? That was the whole craze.
Yeah, I remember that. Where's my sense of taste?
Our research team was going through the appropriateness measures. And so we went through all the choosing wisely guidelines.
Yeah.
So a choosing wisely guideline before COVID was if you have an upper respiratory infection, do not sequence and identify the type of virus.
Right.
Yeah. And yet here we are.
Well, now that there are a lot of tests that need to get used up, Marty, so that's one problem.
Well, honestly, that's why I tested in the first place. We had like 20 tests that were given to my wife for free from Stanford back in the day. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to use some of these. Oh, I'm positive. And then 7 days later, oh, I'm positive again.
I think it has some negative effects because different hospitals have different policies. I was talking to, I think the current policy where I work is that they keep testing until they test negative and they can't come. So even like the faintly positive
That's
line.
Nuts.
I heard of policy on the East Coast at Sloan Kettering was that 7 days after the first test positive, you're allowed to go back to work. But people are inventing all these, rules for when you can go back. It disrupts the labor force. Having a disrupted labor force has a negative healthcare consequence. We have no. And are we even making a lick of difference in an environment where it's an endemic virus that everyone's had and going to have?
Coxsackie virus, when do you come back to work after Coxsackie?
Immediately.
Or rhino.
Yeah. Immediately. There's no test.
Right
There's no test. People are just coming back with that stuff.
Even influenza, people just show up. It's not like anybody's testing for that repeatedly.
Just hawk up a goober on the side. Big old goober. So, if you're sick, stay home, right? That's the basic principle.
That's stay home.
So
that's the right.
The only time it makes sense to test is early in a pandemic. You're trying to track whether or not there's immunity early in the pandemic, right? And then if you're going to change your treatment course, so if you have somebody high risk who's unvaccinated, who meets the criteria, who may benefit from Paxlovid or some treatment, then I might test. But the interesting thing about Paxlovid, because you mentioned how we've saved $6 billion from negotiating drug prices, and we squandered, I think it was $20 billion total was spent on Paxlovid, but $10 billion in the last year or so, because they did 2 major orders. The New England Journal study came out, New England Journal of Medicine study on Paxlovid, 2 big studies in the same issue. This was a couple months ago. No benefit in people under 65, 0. It actually prolonged the duration of illness in some cases. So what I found interesting is when I looked at that study, the study concluded its data collection a year and 9 months prior to its publication.
Yeah, they wanted to slow roll that publication.
Yeah, I mean, they were busy launching one of the biggest recent modern history public health campaigns in history. Ashish Jha in the White House and everybody saying, everyone take Paxlovid. I remember overhead announcements at CVS Caremark. CVS Caremark's all the same. And, Super Bowl ads and all kinds of stuff about.
They knew the results of Epic SR were negative. They knew them for years before they published it. They did that while they were promoting the product for the specific people in whom it doesn't work in. And they knew those data. And they're spending public money on that and promoting it. And then Ashish Jha's got the nerve to go on, Twitter and act like he's Mr. Evidence-Based Medicine. I was like, dude, you pushed an unproven. You pushed not just unproven. You knew it didn't work, and you're out there pushing it. Ridiculous.
So if it squandered $10 billion of taxpayer dollars on that second order of Paxlovid. Now they saved $6 billion. They're only $4 billion in the whole round.
Correct. That's pretty good.
Right? Yeah, that's pretty good.
Quick math. Yeah.
For that one. But here's the thing: when the same company, Pfizer, said that the vaccine booster is effective, we got that information before any publication, before any data was released. Hey, it works, and here you go, media and government, put this out there, and the media does this all the time. WMDs in Iraq, the Vietnam War, they were lying to us about the Afghanistan war for 20 years.
The risk of COVID to kids.
Yeah, that's
the New York Times special, how bad it was for kids.
Someday we'll stop using the racist idea that this originated.
In the Wuhan market.
In the Wuhan market.
That's Apoorva Mandavilli's tweet.
Not even the Chinese believe it came from the wet market.
No.
They've abandoned that idea, but Francis Collins and Fauci still believe it.
I don't know if they believe it. I think they always knew it's not plausible. They just want to cover it up.
They really believe it. It's embarrassing they were funding the lab, even if the dollars didn't go to the actual test tubes. And
Marty, I'll just email you on my Gmail server. That's what Fauci's email said.
Hey,
I'll email you from my Gmail.
His number 2 guy, who they've tried to distance himself from. This guy had regular meetings with Fauci.
Yeah.
He's his assistant to the director. David Morin says in his hearing, he has in an email, hey, I found out from the FOIA lady, the Freedom of Information Act lady at the Freedom of Information Act office, how we can delete emails after the FOIA request. So I think we're safe.
Yeah, that's
no,
what this
literally.
came out. Yeah, it literally came out. I mean, I think that
safe from what?
Even people who are his supporter have to look at these emails that have been released by the Congressional Committee and be concerned that they were actively trying to avoid FOIA disclosure to Congress.
It's amazing it's not a bigger issue in the campaign
because it's
and
on the wrong
else.
it's on the
But
right side.
20 million people died from an epidemic that was most likely entirely avoidable. This originated from the scientific. I mean, why do a small
take
group
precautions in the Wuhan lab?
Why do a small group of doctors get to decide what risks the world will take? I mean, it's unbelievable. But
EcoHealth Alliance was doing the Lord's work.
You're a big fan of Ashish Jha. You guys hang out?
I'm just kidding. EcoHealth was terrible, huh? Ashish? No, I don't hang out with Ashish Jha.
I used to talk to him actually a fair bit. He was a pretty collegial, fun researcher to interact with before COVID, and then I guess he just went all political or something.
Well, I mean, that's what I think. He had done some work that was okay and some work that was good and some work is mediocre, like a lot of scientists, but he was a scientist mostly. But I think he smelt an opportunity early in COVID that the more he was on CNN, the more he was on MSNBC giving those interviews, he did like hundreds and hundreds of sound bites, the more the Biden administration liked that. And then he entered into a relationship where they would send him memos about what their policy was going to be. And he would write op-eds that appeared in the press, like the New York Times. The day the policy drops, he knew it was coming from the administration. And he presents itself as if he's an impartial scientist adjudicating this policy when he's in cahoots with the people who made it. I mean, to me, it's so dishonest.
He tried to get a scientist to write an op-ed saying natural immunity was not a real thing.
Yeah, he said that many times.
I know. He tried to get you to write that also?
No,
you heard about that also.
No, he said it many times that he thought natural immunity was inferior to vaccine-induced immunity when if the end point is, are you going to get severely ill from COVID in the future, it's at least as good or better than vaccination.
This book I have coming out in a month, I did not write about COVID. I feel like people are sick of it.
Yeah.
They're too tribal. They don't want to talk about it. It's not coming up in the election season.
Yeah, it's really
all.
not.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a good sign that finally this contagion is washing out from the collective system. Like, even as you guys are talking about it, I'm just kind of like, COVID. I just have this like...
nobody wants to hear about COVID.
Well, but it's interesting because it's still so important that we not make the same mistakes. So in a sense, like if we stop talking about it at all, totally, we're kind of complicit in the whole thing.
Well, the media has a new angle. Well, one is, I thought about writing a COVID book, and I didn't write it for the exact reason you say, Marty, which is that if I'm walking in the airport and I see a book on COVID, I'm 100% not going to read it because I'm sick of listening to it. But the media has created a new narrative, and the new narrative is like, look, come on, guys, like through the retrospectoscope. Yeah, you got some points. But at the time, it was crazy. Nobody knew better at the time.
That's the whole thing.
But the bullshit with that is,
they did know.
You and I, and the three of us, but particularly Marty wrote so many op-eds.
Yeah.
You said it every step of the way. Yeah. Keep schools open. There's no data for masking in kids. What's the data for boosters in young population? You said it every step of the way. And now they're like, oh, it's just through the retrospectoscope. It's like, but I said it at the time. Oh yeah, natural immunity is protective and you don't have to worry. All these basic things.
Well, we did the study in JAMA. We just tested people who were not vaccinated, who had COVID a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and published the results. And it's like that publication in JAMA, in the main JAMA, was taken down on social media. And it's like...
Really?
Yeah, it was taken down on LinkedIn. You couldn't share it on certain platforms.
Oh, yeah,
anyone commented on it, then it was even worse.
You couldn't share the idea, the hypothesis that lab leak was a possible origin on Facebook. They deleted all those posts.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people try to share something I wrote, and then they're like saying that LinkedIn doesn't allow. LinkedIn is one of the worst, right?
They took down the study. All I did was post, "Hey, here's our study in JAMA."
Link to JAMA, and they took down from your account.
Yeah. And then
I'm surprised people aren't more outraged about that in a country that values free speech.
That's why I only post on Grindr. I know they're libertarians.
They're going to keep it up.
They're keeping it up.
They're keeping it up. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to delve into.
I just did 2 videos on COVID. And what's funny is the algorithm for YouTube still rewards that shit. it's still like COVID. Tell me more.
But then
Really?
it's a lot of, but if you want to know the
but if
truth,
you want to know the truth about
CDC.
COVID, go to the CDC website.
Go to the
yeah.
go to the child masking experts, the real truth, the ones
The
that map
AAP.
the AAP and CDC.
I heard they're going to change their guidance on toddler masking so they can go without a mask for an hour and a half instead of 2 hours.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's a huge progress.
It's like the PGA when the PGA was they did a big survey to find out why no one plays golf. Golf was on the decline before COVID. And it was all the things that, you could have told them in 10 seconds. You didn't have to do a giant study with a big firm. It was like, takes too long. It's too hard.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
It's funny you say that because somebody was just telling me, I heard a piece critical of like some of the research that faculty are doing for K Awards, like this sort of early career faculty, the research they're doing. And this person emailed me to say, there's a researcher, I can't say exactly where it is, but it's a cancer clinic that's in an underserved area. So these people have cancer and they're getting cancer care. And somebody has a research proposal, and I think it's going to get funded, that they're going to screen everyone for food insecurity, which is a euphemism for, are you hungry? Do you not get food, And if you don't get food, they'll give you food. And then the end point is like, nourishment and how happy you are. And I'm like, what the?
Wait.
You don't need a study.
Okay, we talk about parachutes. That's a fucking parachute.
Like,
Ridiculous.
Food is a parachute.
If you're hungry, do I need a study to know I'm thirsty? Drink some water. Like this is absurd what they're funding.
We're making ourselves feel good. We're doing a study looking at the percent of NIH grants that are for health equity or addressing disparities, and what percent are for reducing those disparities as opposed to just describing them.
There,
Documenting it.
yeah.
Well, you need to document a
Right.
few more times.
Yeah. Well, what everybody's known for hundreds of years.
There's a health disparity in every aspect of medicine, right?
Everything
You
we
can
do.
say, oh, is there a health disparity in glaucoma? Oh, guess what? There's a health disparity. African Americans in poor communities do slightly worse. Yeah, it's every part, every molecule in the human
I really
body,
don't know why
right?
they study that. But then
Health disparities are not interesting. What's interesting is how do you reduce
How do
them?
you solve them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you this one. You saw this paper in JAMA Internal Medicine. It was an intervention or randomized trial where they took people who were homeless or had a history of homelessness. 40% were like currently homeless, substance abuse, all those things. And they gave them exactly what they need. They randomized them to CT screening for lung cancer. CT screening for lung cancer or usual care. And then the endpoint was, do you get the first scan? And I'm like, you're a homeless person, have like substance abuse, give them a house. Don't be screening them for CT screening. And then are they going to follow up for all the subsequent scans, the biopsy, the wedge resection? Who knows?
Yeah.
VP,
That's awesome.
I just need to comment on your really insensitive language. It's unhoused.
Oh, unhoused.
Homeless is a
Unhoused.
stigmatizing term. They're not missing a home. They're just currently unhoused.
I have a story to tell you later about that. But I would just say that the group of people who's probably least offended by the term homeless
Is
are
homeless.
people who are homeless.
The people who are
The
homeless.
people most offended by the term homeless are people with second homes. If you have a second home, you like the word unhoused. If you're actually homeless, you don't give a fuck what the
It's
word is. You want a
true. I
fucking
think he's
house.
right.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
You're
wait.
right about
Because
that.
I don't have a third home, does that make me underhoused?
Yeah, you're underhoused.
I'm
Well,
underhoused.
in the Bay Area,
Which
underhoused.
in the Bay Area, you are underhoused.
When you go to Tahoe, you stay in a hotel like some chump.
I stay in an Airbnb.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I know.
And pay that cleaning fee?
God, that cleaning fee though.
You probably have to do half the work yourself. Put it
I
in
mean,
the
my
lawn.
kids can't go to college because of that cleaning fee.
Have you been to medical conferences lately and noticed the number of papers, abstracts, and presentations on health disparities?
It's
That's all
colossal.
of them,
Just descriptive.
Yeah,
It's
descriptive.
a factory. It's a factory of like low quality science by people who may or may not have their heart in the right place. But, I would say like one of the most dangerous person is if your heart's in the right place, but your brain's not. Like you can really do a lot of harm. Like you need to be thoughtful about your research. You can't just keep documenting.
1 in 6 NIH grants is about
No, that's the
1 in
answer?
6. 1 in 6 RFPs in the last cycle were for health equity or disparities.
1 in 4 are to create novel coronaviruses.
Hey, just because they submitted a grant from Wuhan saying they wanted to insert a ferrin cleavage site into a bat coronavirus so it could infect humans doesn't mean they did it.
What's strange is the chief investigator was a civet cat.
No, the pangolin.
Oh, pangolin. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm still fixated on civet cats. I think that was the early speculation.
And I also read that EcoHealth Alliance that I was reading, I don't know if this would be true, but I was reading that they take all this funding and then like some of the people traveling under the auspices of that organization are like flying business class around the world. So is NIH money? So I don't know the answer to that question.
You got to get a good night's sleep if you're going to insert a ferrin cleavage site into a bat coronavirus.
You need to be rested.
That civet cat doesn't have a normal melatonin cycle. It needs to fly first class.
What if it wakes up during anesthesia?
Oh my God. Yeah. Anesthesia awareness in civet cats. That's a health equity issue. They tend to wake up more often than like white civet cats.
I hear there's a very boring YouTube channel where they really don't think lab leak is likely, and they have all sorts of molecular explanations.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of those. What do you guys think of those? Because I'm agnostic on this lab leak thing. I have no idea.
Yeah, actually, I mean, and even though I make my jokes, I'm more agnostic because it's not my expertise. But what do you're the expert?
Well, they submitted a grant saying we want to do this in 2018. Mm-hmm. Then the World Epicenter is 5 miles. The World Epicenter is 5 miles from this same lab that proposed to do it 2 years prior. They filed for a patent in January 2020 for a COVID vaccine. Now, you need to be working on that for a bit to file for a patent. Mm-hmm. But the guy who filed for a patent mysteriously died a couple months later, Dr. Yusin. The Chinese media said he fell off the roof of the Wuhan lab or something like that.
Wow.
But
slippery up there.
There's and over time, if you look at each side of the ledger, the idea of it being from a natural origin versus a lab, they've looked at many different animals, and there's no species where they've identified any of the COVID intermediate.
That's a good point. Right? And then also at least 2 federal agencies, FBI and Department of Energy, think it's lab leak.
Yeah.
And there is clearly in FOIA emails what appears to be sort of a cover-up on a paper.
100%.
Okay, so we want to talk about that. It's the paper called Proximal Origins. It appeared in Nature.
Well, 3 of those authors had told Fauci in a meeting where there were notes later FOIA'd.
Yes.
That they believe it's from the lab early on.
Early on, they believe that.
And then days later, they draft that propaganda piece that says, from our analysis, we concluded did not come from the lab.
Nature Medicine, I think, published it.
Yeah, Nature Medicine.
Nature Medicine.
What's interesting is, let's say it's a lab leak. We've already talked much about we shouldn't be doing gain of function research in that context and all the reasons that we shouldn't do that. Yeah. But let's say it was a wet market thing. How come nobody's saying, maybe we shouldn't torture and eat live wild animals in this way and interface with humans in that way? Because if it did come from that, it's like, well, we're equally complicit and to blame as humans.
Well, that's racist.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And that's what the sort of more liberal aspects of the media were saying early on is, you can't complain about.
You're going to come to my house, tell me how to eat my roti,
Hey, buddy. my I can't say the story out loud, but yeah, there's some interesting eating of wild animal stories from my parents when they were young in India. It's a delicacy. Yeah.
Life was rough.
Life was rough.
So, we're past COVID and we're sort of doing a little retrospect, but it does fall under the rubric of stupid research that should not be done. Virus hunting, for example, inserting a ferrin cleavage site in bat coronavirus. Yeah. Why are we doing this? Why?
You're like, at this rate, let's do some more health disparities documentation.
Yeah, it's safer. It's safer.
It's really safe. It's really safe.
The age of puberty is going down every year, and the microplastics have some binding with estrogen receptors. There are all these giant areas.
Microplastics are good for you.
There's all these giant domains of research where we're doing nothing. Pancreatic cancer has doubled over the last 20 years. What are we doing? Nothing. Nobody's even, at Hopkins, where our group does more pancreatic work than any center in the country, we're doing trials. We just finished one on should you have 1 drain or 2 drain or no drain after the surgery? That's interesting, but we're not discovering any cures here. We're not
that's a home run.
Fields, right?
Yeah.
We finished that a couple years ago, actually.
Well, what's the answer?
What is the answer? How many drains? Because I used to have to deal with that as a student. I'll say I owe these luscious breasts to microplastics and their estrogen mimicking capacity. I would not have this gynecomastia were it not for years of drinking out of little sippy cups and things like that.
And he drinks soy milk out of it too.
Yeah, of course, 100% soy. 100% soy to protect the civet cats.
Watching
because I don't want to have to eat a civet cat.
And tearful.
Totally.
I'm going to submit a public comment to the NIH to fund a study on male gynecomastia for microplastics.
And its association with watching rom-coms.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, Marty. I honestly think it would be better I'm curious what you think. If the NIH, instead of whatever the bullshit they're doing now, they just said anyone who works at a university submits an application and you just put it in a hat and you just pick out random applications to fund. Yeah. It might even be better than the stupidity that they're doing now.
Or fund grants that have one positive vote. If one person on the committee votes positive, that means somebody thinks it's a good idea.
That's an interesting
And then
point.
put it in a hat.
Rather than the current system where if anyone doesn't like you, you're done.
Yeah.
But if you're mediocre and everyone's just like, then you're funded.
Well, why don't they blind these applications as to who's submitting them? Why doesn't the medical community, and a few journals do this, blind who is authored the publication they're reviewing? Because the first thing people do is they look at I know
you
this
have to
guy.
settle your grudges in the review
that's
the
right.
review booth.
That's right.
Yeah.
You settle the grudges there. Marty.
I knew him when he was Martin.
You're like, you know what book I didn't like? Blind Spot. No, I love blind spots. Yeah. And guess what? Hope you like fundraising, Marty, because this grant's rejected.
Rejected. Good luck.
And it's like Eco Health Alliance, another great summit. They funded him after the pandemic too. Remember that?
Yes.
After the pandemic, they like re-upped his money.
Yes. And
He's like, do it again, buddy.
do you know that the NIH lab itself, they didn't fund another group to do it, but the NIH lab itself published an article in 2018 that was titled something like, Wuhan bat coronavirus does not infect dogs.
Who's doing that?
I think it was set in Colorado.
What?
Yeah, they call
Why are
it.
you giving dogs Wuhan bat coronavirus?
Yes.
Oh,
what
hi,
are
Fido,
you
come
doing?
here.
What the hell are you doing?
Oh,
Stop this.
dear.
Whatever it's like a bunch of mad scientists.
Yeah.
I've never read a vampire end of the world apocalypse novel that didn't begin exactly like that.
Yeah, I was
like
like-
Stephen King warned us decades ago.
My review of this study is things are really rough for those.
Oh, I guess you shouldn't bow wow to social pressure. Yeah, God, hours of fun. Marty, what's on our list?
Bow wow.
So one thing I love about Vinay is
Just one thing.
Just one.
Yeah.
one of the many is that I'll think about, someday I'd like to do a deep dive into this topic and really tackle it because I can tell that, say, medical education is entirely broken and I would love to understand it and just take on that issue once.
Yeah.
And then I'll look, and he's put out a comprehensive review, a scathing commentary on medical education that's very, thorough in one day, like in one of his articles and one of his videos.
Yeah.
And so he did that recently on medical
I did,
education.
yeah.
He's
I think on the website, though, look where my shirt is, guys.
Sensible
Sensible
medicine.
Love that place.
Sensible medicine.
Yeah.
You have merch now? I opted out because I was like, I'm not really writing anything about.
Well, yeah, that's a
can't-
bone to pick with you two, gentlemen.
I can't keep up.
You
guys-
guys
I know
are
these
supposed
guys
to be contributors.
Yeah, we're machine. We're
Well,
just not the machines.
Sifu
again.
had these printed up.
Nice.
There's a limited circulation. I think there's 5 or 6.
Is
of
it
these.
worth like that upside down plane stamp at this point? It's so rare.
It's so rare.
Yeah.
But medical education, it's really bad. A couple things I did that you find interesting were on my YouTube channel, there's a video, and this is true. I got like some student to pull questions for the USMLE exam. And whether we like it or not, the schools do to some degree test towards the questions asked on the USMLE exam. Now, these are questions that they think every doctor needs to know these things. Right? These are things like the core knowledge that every doctor, and I think there is some core knowledge that a surgeon, an internist, an oncologist, we all need to know some core knowledge. We go through the questions. We just took the HEMONC questions and we do like 10 of them in the video. In the video, I've never seen the questions and the people in the audience never seen the questions. There's like 6 or 7 HEMONC attendings globally from like all these countries. And we just do the questions and you'll be blown away. Like one question, we're like, sure, it's easy. But do you think the average medical student needs to know that if you have CML and if you get treated for CML, that the drug imatinib is a tyrosine kinase inhibitor? Like, do they need to know that the mechanism of action is a TKI? I don't think
one time in the trauma bay, that came up. And we used
You're like, is this a proteasome inhibitor? Or is it a tyrosine kinase inhibitor? It's a serine 3-amine kinase inhibitor. Oh, of course. You never need to know that.
My psychiatrist brought that up at our session.
Well, so that's a fair point, which is that whatever this core knowledge is, it should be something that the trauma surgeon needs, the oncologist needs. It should be some core knowledge. There's some questions on there that I swear to you, we could not even get. There's one they took the last question we couldn't get because it's so deranged and far from actual practice, and we were furious. And then maybe there are a couple that we liked. But how is this curriculum designed and picked? Who picks this curriculum?
So if let's say you're the dean of a medical school and you realize this entire rote, memorize, and regurgitate system is broken and it's not preparing people adequately to be doctors, it's not fair, it's cruel, it's crushing the creativity out of these altruistic, bright young folks. If you recognize this medical education system is broken, you can't do anything because a small group of people at a private company decide what every medical school has to teach for their exams. It's called the AAMC, and we just accept it as sort of a necessary part of life, like taxes. But it is a small group of people who historically, and I hope the new group is going to be different, have worked like molasses. I mean, they are just dinosaurs when it comes to medical education.
They're like career bureaucrats.
Well, I think the guy who is in charge of it has been there for a while. He'll say, yeah, I like this stuff from people who I know have talked to him. But he's, very slow, like, okay, when do we do this? And what do we cut? No, they still need to know all the names of the Krebs cycle molecule. Well, the urea cycle is important too. And yeah, they need to know whether or not it's a branch chain or non-branch chain bacteria.
Or if it inhibits the 50S ribosomal subunit or ribonucleotide reductase. Yeah, they need to know that.
Very important.
That came up once during a ruptured AAA. Thankfully, we had a student who has no social skills, but he memorized every single thing in the textbooks and was able to spit it out.
Wow. Zubin is right here with
I'm right.
There's no way to
right here. You don't have to talk about me like I'm neuroatypical, which I am. Whenever I'm running a code, often I'll shout out these questions because I think they're valuable when I'm doing compression.
30S or 50S.
30S or 50S. Someone ask ChatGPT, and then you get a nice hallucinatory answer.
It's so interesting because this is a great example of overregulation. Because it's a space where truly nobody knows, we can have different conceptions of how to train medical students. And what you'd want is medical schools will be laboratories of experiment. Yeah. One medical school will do it one way, another medical school will do it another way. And then maybe with some time, we'll be able to either run a study or say, hey, look, what they're doing at University of Virginia, they've banned in all this molecular biology. They're focusing more on epidemiology, whatever they're doing, they got much better residents. We all agree. We can't do that because the AAMC cabal, illegal monopoly. They set they just tell you have to teach nonsense. And why does nobody revolt? Why can't we just?
I think it's starting to change. In the old days, the old guard of medicine, let's call it healthcare 2.0 or 1.0.
2.0 is too advanced. It's 1.0.
1.0, negative 1.0. They used to be like, okay, we're putting a position statement in the New England Journal. We are getting a resolution passed by the AMA. We're getting a sheesh jaw from the White House to tell everyone what to do. And that was it. They could control everyone. It was mind control. Yeah. Now, you got Benai out there running this podcast. You got Sensible Medicine. You got Peter Attia. You got Casey Means is out there now talking about that core knowledge set that everyone needs. That's not inconsequential. It's not just a foreign language that everyone needs to become fluent in. There are basic principles that affect every disease process, every specialty that get almost no attention, and most people still don't really fully understand. Insulin resistance, general body inflammation, mitochondrial health, micronutrients, the role of toxins in society.
Penis enlargement.
These are clearly understudied.
Understudied.
Understudied. The question is appropriately or inappropriately understudied.
Depends on who's asking.
So your point is very interesting to me, which is I think you're making the point that that one of the reasons you're optimistic is that historically medicine has had gatekeepers towards who could talk about these things. Journals were the only outlet to talk about these things. Now there's so much alternative or other venues, from Sensible Medicine to podcasts to YouTube to all these things, that it is a threat to journals. And I think I agree with you 100%. Some of the things that threaten journals, I'm happy to say these people are getting it wrong. But some of the threatening journals, they're getting it right. But it's up to the audience to decide. It's a free market of ideas. The journals are going to get obliterated. Whenever I look at these journals and the editors...
Can't come soon enough.
And they should be obliterated. But the editors, they don't have their finger on the pulse. When the journals make a podcast, you want to die.
You want to die.
You
get invited to those podcasts, it's just no.
I can't even go on because the interviewers are so dull that it would drop.
Puts you to sleep and you're the guest.
If you put a VPZD show and you put the New England Journal of Medicine podcast author interview and you ask anyone to watch, people would. You have to lock the windows in that room because people would be jumping out of it
and put them on ketamine.
Yeah, they need the ketamine.
New England Journal podcast is in my living will. If I'm in a permanent vegetative state, they're supposed to play it in my ear And if there's a video portion projected on the ceiling of the ICU bed, and that will kill me.
It's palliative.
We'll take
It's
you out,
fully
yeah.
palliative. Yeah, in
Or an
Sweden,
ASCO
they've been
talk.
using it for
Oh,
years
it's terrible.
as legal euthanasia.
You know, I want to
euthanasia.
finish about ask conferences. I have an idea for
ASCO.
conference.
I'm going to ASCO this year.
You are?
Yeah.
What?
I don't know why. They asked
ASCO
me
or
to give
ASH?
ASCO.
Oh shit!
They asked me to give some talks, so I guess.
Oh wow, we should hang out.
Yes.
We should hang out.
Good. Placebos are fascinating. Placebo studies.
Oh yeah, they're all part. Well, here's what I was saying to do for conferences. Okay, like it's really bad. If you go to like any of the sessions, it's really bad. And I was thinking about like, why is it so bad? Every once in a while, somebody's good for 10 minutes, but then bad. Like the delivery is bad, the content is bad, the tone is bad, it's clutter, it's all sorts of bad things. The answer is they're choosing the speakers based on a 400-word written submission. Here's my proposal. It's a 5-day event. Day 1, you break up everyone into small rooms and you do in each room 5 presentations. The winner advances. Day 2, it's like an NCAA tournament. Day 2, winners compete.
Madness.
Winners compete. And then the audience votes on who advances to the next round. And then plenary session, we're picking the 6 winners of the prior 4 days or whatever to like go up on the big stage. Why don't we screen for abstract for who can actually give the best talk, which is a combination of scientific merit, how entertaining you are, if you're a good speaker. And, some people are going to say, well, you can have good science and not be a good speaker. Yeah. Well, then fucking write a paper and shut the fuck up. Like, this is a talk.
Yeah.
Then there's another form for that. Then publish in Nature. This is a talk. And like the audience, we are literally dying. Meanwhile, nobody goes to the meeting and they just go to the after hours like talks.
So wait, you fuckers are going to ASCO.
Yeah.
Okay, you're both going to be there.
Yeah.
What if I show up and we do a live VPZD feat Marty at ASCO and see how many people show up to that?
Oh, it will blow it up.
Oh, it'll be one janitor.
And he'll be like,
I'm thinking
Tyrus
about.
and Kindness.
I'm going to write a manuscript and shove each paragraph onto one PowerPoint slide and read it to the audience in the most monotone way, starting with, "Can you see my slides? Is the mic working? And I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to prepare because I was only notified of the talk 6 months prior." If I survive, I may not make it to the conference because I expect to be diagnosed with send us your slides in advance harassment syndrome.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I have a foundation dedicated to the eradication of that.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, it has no funding.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we have an ICD code for it now.
Oh, yeah.
we got
With
that.
or without epilepticus.
With or without slides.
With the
With or without questions.
Oh, God.
God, the question's a point.
So, but again, like this is, we act like this, we're trivializing it to some degree, but we're not. Because this kind of thing where we're able to communicate science effectively is absent in most of medicine. Yeah. And what it means is then the shit that's the loudest gets the most attention.
That's another good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we need more Vinays, we need more Martys, we need fewer of me because it's not enough hair.
I like your idea, Vinay, because I'll tell you what, every conference I've been to, you leave thinking there was 1 or 2 great presentations.
Yeah. And only a few people saw it by chance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I gave a talk and there was like nobody in the audience once. It was like my second year on faculty at Hopkins. I was presenting on the surgical checklist and I was like, hey, we created this cool thing. We're using it before operations. We did a little study. And I get up there and, the lights are bright. So you don't know how many people are in this giant auditorium. Yeah. And I realized there's only 2 people in the front row.
Wow.
And so I start off by...
And what'd you tell your mom and dad?
I was nervous. I changed the field of medicine. I have a talk at the conference. Yeah. So I just start off saying what I was taught to say. I said, I want to start off by thanking both of you for being here. And they looked back and said, we're just here because we're giving the next 2 talks.
That's a good one.
Man, your therapy bill must be so high, man. Like, I can't imagine.
Then I got the memo.
People,
people only go for the side receptions and
see
their buddies.
That's right.
Like this is the state of scientific discovery and research is terrific. When people are going to the conferences, skipping the meetings are boring, the presentations are boring, and they're going just for the receptions and the cocktails.
That's you're right. That's the state of scientific research.
And spending your CME money.
Yeah. Spending somebody else's money.
Money.
You don't have skin in the game like everything else in
medicine.
medicine.
And the NIH ignoring all of these giant issues right in our face so they can fund the Rocky Mountain Lab to see whether or not a bat coronavirus from Wuhan, I don't know how it gets to Colorado, infects dogs. Like that's...
At least use a beaver. Something that's like harder for you just to encounter.
Yeah.
You know?
You'd have to go in the dam.
Exactly.
So there's another thing I was going to mention in addition to medical education. Anything else you wanted to say on medical education?
No, I mean, I think, the biggest barrier is that we're locked into a curriculum. The curriculum is, doesn't give the core knowledge. It doesn't give critical appraisal, doesn't give critical thinking. And the culture changed, I think, a lot in my career, where in University of Chicago, when I trained, there was a culture of debate and dialogue. Now that's dead. It's sort of this ideology that you can't let people talk about anything. Everything is taboo.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have a conference on long COVID where you get somebody present to actually point critically to some of this long COVID research, the lack of good definition, the fact that every single blood test that's standardized drawn from these patients is exactly the same as people who don't have long COVID, and yet it affects every organ system. How is that possible? The problems with the WashU research, like long COVID is a taboo topic. Even masking. To this day, we have a annual mask mandate. You can't have a debate on that at our university. Nobody wants to talk about. So this idea that everything in medicine is taboo, terrible.
And imagine, I look back early in my career before I had tenure and all the stuff, where I got to the point where I said, I'm just going to focus on what I think is important, what has impact, not what's going to get me an abstract at the little tiny, pond where we submit abstracts. And if I started criticizing the New England Journal or JAMA over the shenanigans I had to go through, or the NIH grant process,
you'd be blacklisted.
Or the tenure process because it promotes dumb stuff. I mean, you don't, right? It's like part of the culture of obedience. You can't bite the hand that's trying to feed you. And so if you start criticizing these massive institutions, you'd have a hard time. But now it's different. There's a new generation. They don't believe in just blind allegiance to the man. It's an anti-corporate,
my generation,
social
or
justice.
younger than me.
Yeah, I was going to say younger than us. They also don't believe in working. But I'm kidding. I'm kidding, guys and gals.
So speaking of working, the American Board of Medical Specialties.
Ah, yes.
Oh, another heroic group.
Heroic group, here to make sure they test us even into our careers using test questions that have nothing to do with our practice and have no data saying they actually help outcomes for patients. But yet they cost thousands of dollars and take so much of our time and add yet another administrative click burden to our already full plate.
Yeah.
Take it away, Marty.
Yeah.
Let's do this, right? I mean, that sounds like a great idea.
They just introduced a $285 to $300 fee that every board-certified doctor in America is going to have to pay every 2 years or so, depending on their specialty, for life. For
what
life.
Purpose? For what would we get from it?
To say that you are currently board certified. So, and they're moving towards the point where
these people are.
They're changing the language so that if you don't pay, if you're behind on paying or taking their little online quiz, then you are not current in your board certification. Imagine your college called you and said, hey, in order to have your college degree, if you want to say you went to Stanford, you got to pay Stanford every 2 years, $300
to stay current.
Yeah. How do we know you're still living up to this standard?
You have to do maintenance of bachelors of arts. So you have every few years you have to do these projects, these QA projects based on your and not based on your major. So you majored in music, but they're having you do science projects. And if you don't do that, they take your bachelor's degree away. And now you've no longer graduated college.
Same thing.
These are all rent-seeking organizations, the PBMs. And these organizations, basically, they're a parasite on the body of medicine.
Yes,
Medicine's got a lot of blood in us, so we can tolerate a few ticks. But eventually, you can kill a host when the ticks become so plentiful. And these ticks have grown so big and sucked so much blood. I want to see them all ripped off.
Just pop. So much blood they explode.
But then that's how they got now.
Yeah.
But then they still stay embedded.
That's from the head parts.
Yeah, you got to rip the head
but
parts.
it's
still
like
infected with babesiosis.
We glamorize the ability to serve on these boards, the head of the board and the CEO. We had the CEO of the American Board of Internal Medicine come to Johns Hopkins and give a speech.
Rich Barron?
Yeah, Rich Barron. I think he's stepping down soon.
No, I think they pushed him out.
Does he make like $1 million a year?
I think
They
like
pushed him out?
1.7 million or something. Yeah, because he went on some podcast and he made a fool of himself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh.
So he's leaving.
Yeah, I think he's.
I'm devastated, but I'll recover quickly. So he's talking about, people people think there was election fraud when there wasn't. It's like, what is going on? We're at
Why are you
Johns
talking about
Hopkins.
this? Yeah.
What are we talking about this?
Yeah.
And these are the people who are going to decide if you are spreading misinformation and are going to have your boards revoked. Now, I don't want to give them $300 every 2 years.
Hell no.
I
Give
mean,
it to Tierstein. It's like $100 every.
Well, they're
whatever.
trying to cut them out now.
Yeah.
They're trying to cut
the
them
monopoly.
out. Yeah, we got to stand with those guys.
Yeah,
National Board of Physicians.
NBPAS. Yeah. NBPAS.org is their website. Yeah.
They do good work.
Good people.
they're actually doing good.
Yeah. Yeah, because what they want is continuing medical education credits, and they're quite strict about it. Like they look at the actual certificates carefully. They'll ask you follow-up questions. Like they care about you doing the CME. You could argue whether CME is useful or not. But that said, then you pay them some small fee, like $200 or something every couple of years, and you're certified.
Last year I published 61 papers, and you tell me that after all that work in medicine, I still got to do some MOC and CMA.
Yeah, you need really 70 papers.
Yeah, 70 papers
to say that you are up to date.
Up to date.
Yeah. And how many of those papers were in Teen Beat magazine? That's what I would want.
I wish.
Yeah, I know, right? That's aspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the American Board of Medical Specialties, which is the parent board of these 16 or so sub-boards like ABIM, they are now they've convinced a lot of hospitals to say, you have to require all your doctors to be current. In other words, pay us. And even some insurers.
Insurers, right? Because you can't bill. That's the thing. So why get that? Why even get certified if it's such a scam? Well, because you can't get paid and you can't have a job. Well, that kind of eliminates any option to not do it. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is mine was up in 2022 for maintenance of cert at ABIM, and I refused to do their bullshit. I refused to pay them a dime. And so I'm now not certified with the American Board of Internal Medicine, even though I recerted in 2012 at my tenure. And so technically I'm not board certified in internal medicine, but I am board certified through NBPAS. But I probably couldn't get a job at a hospital.
So you're board certified unless the hospital falls for the BS of the ABMS that says you have to be current on your ABMS.
That's right.
Board.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not even. And none of this has anything to do with the quality of care you provide.
No, because it's trash no matter what.
It's trash.
Yeah, my quality of care is garbage whether I'm.
I got that.
The Infectious Diseases Society did a study and published it and surveying their members, and they thought it was not useful, it was a burden, and they didn't like it. That was the majority view of them. So there's some data now from people who are going through this saying we don't think it's of any value.
I feel like this culture of obedience is a real thing. It's a hierarchical power dynamic that's been going on for decades in medicine. We're conditioned from the beginning. I'm sure when we talk about your book, you might touch on some of this on the next episode. But it's
you're absolutely right.
I just saw that.
Kiss the ring, Vinay. I'm older than you.
I just saw there's a chief of surgery at a large hospital, which I won't name, but it's in Eastern Virginia. Actually, it's called Eastern Virginia Medical Center. So I cannot keep a secret. Okay, so the current chief of surgery, who is very powerful, basically runs that hospital, was a big trustee. They built a statue, like a 12-foot statue of this doctor in front of the hospital, this gigantic statue. He is the current chief of surgery. He's not retired. What? He didn't pass away.
This is like the Saddam Hussein school of medicine. Idolatry.
Yes.
And didn't Zuckerberg make a big statue of his wife?
He made a big thing of his wife, and she looks like the Statue of Liberty. Like it's all weird and blue, and like it's got flowing robes and stuff.
But don't you do that when someone retires
or dies?
I
mean, even then, you only get a painting. You don't get a statue.
Right.
When you're alive.
I mean, this is 3D. Marty.
And you're the current. This guy's known to, he's kind of a backslapper, fun guy, buddies up to people. He's well-liked. There was talk that he was going to run for mayor in that town and could have won if he wanted to. So he had this rule that students had to wear, everyone in his department of surgery has to wear a white shirt under their white coat. And if he caught some student, like there was a student one day that came in with a blue shirt under his white coat, and he humiliated him in that class. He gave a talk and he said something to him like, "I'm sorry, is this the Home Depot?"
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's well known like that this guy kind of runs a tight shop and, has his rules and his pet peeves and all this stuff.
Just that statement is a health disparity.
Well, it says something about the culture of medicine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're glamour worshiping people like that.
It's a demagogue.
Yeah, during their time.
Yeah. Where's my fucking statue? That's what I want to know. I did a lot of stuff in medical education, and here I am statueless.
You should have it commissioned.
I should. I should have like Banksy do it. What else you got on our list, Marty?
We should go to the
That's
second.
it. So we're
get into our.
You guys are always welcome to come visit Baltimore sometime.
Ooh.
Vinay, you're welcome back. Since you're a Hopkins
I spent
grad.
a year there. I'm a Hopkins alum.
How many bulletproof vests do I need?
There's a lot of misinformation. Baltimore is safe 99% of the time.
Oh, that's good.
1% of the time you're going to get shot.
But 99% you're fine. Hey, can I buy Kevin Spacey's place? I heard it's open.
Oh. I didn't. Sure. Yeah.
Oh, he's got like
House of Cards.
Yeah.
Be more. Yeah.
Hey,
we'd love
great
to
see you guys.
Great to see you, Marty.
Man, what a joy.
Great to
The
see
three
you.
horsemen of the COVID apocalypse.
COVID
back.
And we'll be back in just a couple weeks to talk about blind spots.
Can't wait to come back for that.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy the book.
Yeah.
Yep. Until then, guys, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Follow Dr. Prasad.
Yes, on YouTube as well.
Get ready for Marty's book. And just ignore me. And we're out.
We're out.
Peace.
Peace.